Hello, church. Pastor Nathan here. It is Monday afternoon, and I wanted to upload this video, which is my evaluation of the PCA report on human sexuality. I'd like to walk through some sections of the report with you. I'll give you a little bit of an overview. I'll give you my praise of it as well as some of my criticisms of it. So I'd like for you to download this. You can find it on the internet fairly easily. If you Google PCA study report on PCA report on human sexuality, then it will come up. If you Google that PCA report on sexuality, the first thing that comes up is titled Report of the Ad Interim Committee on Human Sexuality. So if you will, go there and we'll look at this report together. It's about 65 pages long. The layout of the report, I'll mention that first. You have it's important to understand the structure of it if you're going to, let me do this. Let me go ahead and give you my summary statement, and then I'll walk you through some of the sections of the report that are worthy of noting. I would grade this overall with an A minus. I think there's a lot of good things in here. I think there's a lot of true and helpful things that are honoring to God and that are faithful. My criticism would be there are a few sections that are really important where I would give the report a C minus. I think that at some important points, the report really stopped short of of what it should have done in terms of adhering to a full-orbed view of the biblical's take on human sexuality. So overall, an A minus, but there are a couple of important points where I think it really could have been better. So I'll highlight what those are. Here's the layout of the report. You have a few introductory pages, and then you have the 12 statements. And think of these as the 12 summaries of the findings of the report. And then what follows after those 12 statements are some expanded sections. One of them is on temptation, sin, and concupiscence, which is a very old word that has a Latin derivation, concupiscence. That deals with the proneness, the inclination toward sin, kind of the precursor to you actually deciding to sin. This section I didn't find very helpful. I think it goes into far too much detail. It's probably 12 pages on concupiscence. Some of the parts are relevant. I think a lot of it could have been footnotes. I didn't get a lot of help from that. The next section is about 10 pages on pastoral care, where it begins to really address some of the specific and concrete questions and issues regarding LGBTQ issues and questions, sexual identity, and those sorts of things. And that was a mixed section that I think, again, had a lot of good things in it, but also had some things that were some serious shortcomings. The next section I was surprised by. It was kind of an apologetic section. The next pages, I think pages 35 to 44, was a surprise. And I got a lot of help from that, actually. That really deals with how is it that Christians should evaluate this society's sexual ethic and how do we respond to it. That was surprising to me because I find it carefully nuanced, it was balanced, and that was my favorite part of the report, actually. There were some things in there I had just never read that were very informative, such as the idea that it was Christians who profoundly altered the Roman understanding of human sexuality and really removed sexuality from an area which was just rife with abuse. So that section was very helpful. And then you have then there's an annotated bibliography, which is about 6 or 8 pages, and then a 2-page conclusion. And I want to mention the conclusion because it was when I read the conclusion that I understood a lot more about the report. Now I'll come back to why the conclusion was so important in just a moment. But for now, let me turn to a few of the things that I thought were strong and weak in the report. Something that I thought was important is in statement 4, which is on page 8 of the report. There's an affirmation, and it says this: um, the desire for an illicit end or goal, whether in sexual desire for a person of the same sex or in sexual desire disconnected from the context of biblical marriage, is itself an illicit desire. Therefore, the experience of same sex attraction is not morally neutral. The attraction is an expression of original or indwelling sin that must be repented of and put to death. I think that's 100% accurate. I think that's very well said. Then there are these neverthelesses, which I don't tend to like, because sometimes they're taking back what they just said. But I want to highlight that as something that I thought was praiseworthy. That statement, number 4 on desire. Then the next section is on temptation, and then there was one in statement number 9 on identity. Identity, really, this was kind of the crux of the matter, and why the elders of the PCA, the teaching elders and ruling elders, why we voted to put together this study committee to study the issue of human sexuality. Because thankfully, I'm not aware of anybody in the PCA who's saying that we need to affirm homosexual activity or practice. There might be some secret people who aren't saying it and who really want to move the denomination in that way, but that is just not something that anybody is saying. But what makes this difficult is that these sorts of issues, like, is it okay for a Christian who struggles with same-sex attraction to identify as a quote-unquote gay Christian? I mean, that's a very, very serious issue, and it's one that it was one of the key questions that caused the study committee to be put together in the first place. And so the weakness at these points is what really gives me some concern about some of these sections. So here's statement 9 on identity. For example, on page 11, it says this: we name our sins but are not named by them, which I agree with. Moreover, we recognize that there are some secondary identities, when not rooted in sinful desires or struggles against the flesh, that can be legitimately affirmed along with our primary identity as Christians. That concerns me, because the whole question we're talking about is sexual identity. And is it legitimate to say, I'm a gay Christian? I'm not practicing, but that's still nevertheless my identity because I experience same-sex attraction. And then this is where it just sort of went off the rails. For example, the distinctions between male and female, or between various nationalities and people groups, are not eradicated in becoming Christians, but serve to magnify the glory of God in his plan of salvation. That was a concerning move that they made right there. Why would they then bring up male, female, nationalities, people groups? These are not connected to sin in any way. So it concerns me that they brought it up at that point. They really have begun comparing apples to oranges. So that concerned me. That was the end of that one. Another one about language that was probably one of my biggest problems with the report is in statement 10 on page 12. It says some things that I agree with in the first paragraph. For example, for many people in our culture to self-identify as gay suggests that one is engaged in homosexual practice. I would say that everybody would think that. I mean, there might be some people out there who don't, but pretty much everybody. If you say, I am a gay person, I am a gay Christian, whether it's in the world or in the church, most people would hear, okay, you are calling yourself a Christian, and yet you are engaged in a gay lifestyle. So, it goes on to say this in the next paragraph. Nevertheless, we recognize that some Christians may use the term gay in an effort to be more readily understood by non-Christians. The word gay is common in our culture, to which I would add, yes, we all know what it means. And we do not think it wise for churches to police every use of the term. I just wrote in the margin, nope. I understand that in the church, it's not our responsibility to hold a gun to somebody's head and tell them what they can and can't do. But I thought that was very, very lacking, that particular sentence, because anybody in my church who says, look, I want to identify as a gay Christian, and I mean by that, I am gay because I experience same-sex attraction, but I am not acting out on that. I'm not living an active homosexual lifestyle. I would put my arm around that brother or sister and say, that is not your identity. Your identity is not as a gay Christian just because that's a struggle of yours. I, Nathan Parker, in the past have been involved in drug use and was an alcoholic for years as a teenager, but I'm not Nathan Parker, the alcoholic Christian, trying to not do that anymore. In my case, and this might not be the case with people who identify and are engaged in a homosexual lifestyle, in my case, that struggle is just not there anymore. And I thank God for that. I'm not tempted by drugs and alcohol anymore. And I understand that some people who experience same-sex attraction, nevertheless, that struggle will continue once they're regenerate. I believe that happens with people. I don't doubt that. I don't deny that. I still have my own particular struggles. They're different. It's not drugs and alcohol anymore. So anyway, that was I thought that was a very weak part of the report that I wish they had written differently. And the last thing I'll say is on a very important section that I would ask you to turn to is on pages 29 through 31, and this is where they go into more depth on questions like sexual identity and on language and on being gay and a gay Christian and things like that. I had some very serious issues. This is the section that expands on the earlier statement, statement 10, I think it was, about one identity. And I won't repeat what my issues were with that, but in the section about language, gay and gay Christian, and orientation, I found it really good in certain sentences, and then really disappointing. And if you kind of look in the margins where I wrote, it was like bad X check mark, two X's bad check mark X check mark. It was kind of back and forth. I was very confused. Like, what are they doing here? And it was when I read the conclusion that I understood what had happened. Now, this is my take. This is my assessment on how this report was actually put together. Is in the conclusion, they write these words on page 53. They write this in the second paragraph. We confess that we began our work with the obvious understanding that members of this committee were chosen to represent varying perspectives in our church. That is, that the committee members on the study committee were deliberately selected because this one's more conservative, this one's more progressive, or whatever word you want to attach to that. And they said there was initially a wariness in their initial discussions as to how they were going to tackle this. And my assessment of this is that in some of these sections that are truly contested, it is not the case that kind of the left and the right were able to agree and create a synthesis, but rather you find one sentence that came from someone on the right, and then right after that, a sentence or two from someone who was more on the left. And then after that, a conservative, and then after that. So it really is a mashup. It's a mashup. The report doesn't say that, but that's my assessment of what's happening. There is a lot in the report that I think is fantastic. It is well written. It appears to be well researched, and I think that's commendable. There are sections that I think are gloriously true, and I 100% would sign my name on it. There are other things that did give me concern, and I hope and I pray that the PCA, which I think is a remarkably faithful denomination, God has preserved denomination for almost 50 years now and kept it faithful to the Lord. I do pray that we don't begin drifting in a direction that would be more uh, congenial to the world than to the Word of God. And I'm fully committed to the PCA. There are PCA members in churches that, as a result of this, have begun to move away from the PCA. There's, in fact, a new denomination forming. My understanding is that it's a very small little thing, but I pray that we will not move in a more progressive direction as a denomination. That is your pastor's view on this, and I hope that you will join me in that. Well, anyway, I could say a lot more, but I wanted to just try to summarize this in about 15 minutes. We're a little bit over that, but at any point, if you want to reach out to me and want to discuss these things, I would be very happy to. Pastors love talking about these sorts of things. I hope that I made my position, but ultimately the Bible's position on human sexuality. I hope I made that very clear yesterday in my message about God's design for humanity and for sexuality. And my prayer is that no matter what the future holds, my prayer is that our church would be a safe place for people to come and to find the healing that only Jesus Christ can bring, even if their sinful struggle concerns same-sex attraction. My desire is that this would always be a safe place and a welcoming place where people will know that they will be loved and that they can hear the good news that there's forgiveness and there's healing possible through the gospel. All right, I'll leave it with that. God bless, and hope to hear from some of you soon. All right, bye-bye.